Okay, imagine this. It's 2018 and video games are doing pretty well, with most AAA titles being in their prime around this time. However, in the unknown world of VR games, things have been really rough, as 2016 was the last good year where a bunch of quality releases were made. However, right now it's mostly just developers experimenting with what they can do. Now this all comes down to virtual reality having a bunch of limitations, with one of these limitations being its movement, as just like in normal console games you move around in VR using the log stick. The difference being in VR, log stick movement feels a bit clunky at best and immersion breaking at worst. That was until Echo VR released. Echo VR was a VR game about playing ultimate frisbee in zero gravity, and the way it solved the VR's issue of movement was by taking place in zero gravity. There was no need to use the log stick. Instead, you could just grab onto things and fling yourself around because, well, it was in zero gravity, which felt a lot more natural and immersive and way more fun. I bring this all up to try and explain why this game was so unique at the time and why it was instantly beloved upon release, and whilst it wasn't the most popular VR game or community, it was certainly the most structured, with competitive tournaments and big YouTubers popping up almost instantly around the game. Despite the game getting minimal updates over the years, with it mostly just being cosmetic additions, the game would stay alive for almost half a decade, with it seeming like it could never die. And the fact that a small little VR game could do this and create such an eternal community just proved that VR is legitimate as an actual console and not just a fad. And then the game was shut down, for no reason. Yep, the excuse given by the creators on why the game was shut down is that it wasn't drawing enough players, which is wrong on so many levels for so many different reasons based on everything I've just said. My personal conspiracy on why they shut down the game is that the governing body of VR, Meta, ordered them to, so they could try and promote their own competitive game Population 1, in hopes that the Echo VR player base would migrate over to theirs. My evidence being Population 1 went free to play around the time of Echo VR's shutdown, and a Population 1 advertisement was literally in the lobby of Echo VR's dying days. It's clear to me that Population 1 was trying to take Echo VR's position as a pillar of VR, and no hate to the game, it's pretty good, but you ain't that guy, pal. This video is about games with communities that will never die and will always live on through something, no matter what, and whilst the Echo VR game was shut down, its community lives on as its player base has migrated to a bunch of other things. Some of it went to playing Population 1, whilst other groups of the player base went to playing pirated versions of Echo VR. However, most of the player base went to playing this one game in particular, a game that follows in Echo VR's footsteps by not conforming to the same log stick movement. And that game is a little game called Gorilla Tag. Gorilla Tag is a VR game created by a guy called Lemming. Lemming being one of the top competitive players for Echo VR and really liked the Echo VR movement system and wanted to create his own game using it. Just of course, instead of playing Ultimate Frisbee as robots, you're playing a game of tag as gorillas. And rather quickly the game blew the hell up, with the community far surpassing Echo VR, with the game going from just being a simple indie game made by Lemming to having a whole development team behind it. More than any other VR game in a long time, Gorilla Tag had broken into the mainstream. And so if any game and its community are to continue on Echo VR's legacy and community, I'd definitely confidently say it's this one. Now, unlike Echo VR, which had one central community that played it, Gorilla Tag had multiple communities surrounding the game, with each community playing the game for a different reason. Some did it for the parkour and competitive aspect of the game, others played the game for the more social and chill vibe, whilst others played Gorilla Tag for the existential horror aspect of the game. And no, that is not a joke. If you were to load into a private Gorilla Tag lobby where there's no other players and it's just you, there's this feeling of creepiness that will ride over you, like there's something out there, like a ghost or a monster watching you, even though there's nothing. And soon enough, people started reporting that they've seen this supposed ghost or monster hiding within the game. Even though none of it was real, of course, a whole community around these supposed Gorilla Tag creepypastas popped up, where people would try and hunt them down and make up their own. Some Gorilla Tag players who had the ability to hack the game decided to use their cheats to troll as Gorilla Tag ghosts, flying around, playing creepy music, turning invisible, all to scare some kids who believed that Gorilla Tag ghosts were real. My previous channel was actually centered around talking about these Gorilla Tag creepypastas, which grew a community in itself. Now, I've already talked about the rise and fall of the Gorilla Tag creepypasta community in a previous video, but what I haven't talked about is my specific part of it and the rise and fall of that, so that's what I'm gonna do now. Video game communities are a very whack thing the internet has brought us, whereas before the only people you talked to video games about were your friends, if they were even interested or if you even had any. Now with the internet you can find like-minded people on anything almost immediately. It doesn't matter how random or unknown or hidden a topic is, if it's on the internet, there's probably a community about it. Something as bizarre as some crappy random YouTube channel talking about Gorilla Tag creepypastas can cause a butterfly effect which creates entire communities to form around it. And that's another thing, butterfly effects. As much as this video is about how communities never die, something that's equally as important is how they're created, which more often than not is due to that butterfly effect, a set of coincidences that ripple into creating the community. So for example with Gorilla Tag, something as huge as that was all created just because the developer wanted to create a fan game for Echo VR. Or in the case of my creepypasta community that I spawned, that all began because someone wanted me to promote their creepypasta called HappyBot. HappyBot was supposed to be this robot which acted all friendly but would occasionally turn evil and flip. A pretty simple concept, with the kicker being that you could meet it if you went into the code 4422139. In Gorilla Tag, a code is basically their version of a server, and so when uploading this video on HappyBot, a bunch of my fans who watched the video joined 4422139, and it accidentally became a hangout code for people who watched my channel and were in my Discord. This is something the HappyBot creator did not appreciate, as now the code was getting associated with me more than him, the creator. And so he would try and convince everyone that him and another guy called Alfie were the owners of the code and not me, which I agreed with, but no one really listened to him, so he ended up leaving. And since I didn't use the code all that much too, I kind of considered myself left too, leaving Alfie to be technically the person who's leader of the code. Alfie would split his time to many other communities as well, so when he wasn't here, my real life friend Fludge would take over as being the leader of 4422139. I bring this whole debate about who the leader of 4422139 up to say that this is just one of the many storylines that happened in 4.4 as part of its rich history. In the server, respected community figures would emerge, annoying trolls would get kicked out, people would make friends, people would have fallouts. It was like a second world or life of sorts, and all because some kid wanted me to promote their Gorilla Tag creepypasta. Which, speaking of, since the server got popular, a bunch of creepypasta creators would start using 4422139 as part of the lore for their creepypasta, which started making a Gorilla Tag creepypasta MCU connected universe, which is something I thought I'd never say in my life. Slowly but surely this community died out. I mean, there was no shot a community about Gorilla Tag creepypastas of all things was gonna last very long. But even though it was dead and had no players on it, simply just going into the code and walking around, there's this aura that comes from it. As after all the events that have happened in the code, it's given it some kind of aura that standing in it feels like you're looking at a museum of past memories. And as cliche as it sounds, a community will always live on through that aura. So in summary, Echo VR's community will never die because its legacy got passed down to Gorilla Tag, and 4422139's community will never die because its legacy is still there. The code is still up, anyone can go join it and revive it and continue the community. And that's exactly what happened. A group of role players have started using 4422139 for their Gorilla Tag roleplays. Now they're a bit odd, with some of them being a bit emotionally attached to the code and overprotective about making sure everyone knows that the code is theirs now, and that everything that happened before they arrived is irrelevant and stupid. Which is awfully similar to what the original creator of 4422139, the HappyBot creator, was doing back in the day, so in an ironic way we've come full circle. So what have we established so far? Well, it's that communities will never die because their legacy will always live on through the game, and this legacy can be passed down to different games. And just like how Echo VR's legacy got passed down to Gorilla Tag, Gorilla Tag's legacy has been passed down many times too, as there are hundreds of Gorilla Tag fan games. Even I made one once. And it all began with the first Gorilla Tag fan game, Monkey Horror Game. Yep, that's his name. Monkey Horror Game was made by a fella called Trout, who created the game because he looked at Gorilla Tag and thought, what if I used this movement system but in a different genre, which is the exact same way Lemming created Gorilla Tag in the first place when looking at Echo VR. And for about a week this game was just as popular as Gorilla Tag, which prompted many kids to try and think, maybe I could make my own Gorilla Tag inspired horror game. With one of these games being Scary Monkey Horror. Yeah, not very subtle with its inspirations, is it? Now Scary Monkey Horror has quite the legacy behind it, since it's a fan game of a fan game of a fan game. And does it live up to that legacy? No, the game sucks. The first thing you'll realise when loading into Scary Monkey Horror is that it's a complete rip from Gorilla Tag. They straight up got the map and some code from Gorilla Tag, dumped it in a Unity project, turned the lighting down, and then added some monsters and called it a game. Speaking of the monsters, they're rather primitive, as they just spaz around on the ground doing the same walk animation until you get a little close to them, in which they'll just charge at you, and if they catch you, they'll crash your game. Now the game does give a bit of a twist to each of the maps. In the forest there's these walls and crates which protect the spawn area, which gives it a bit of environmental storytelling, which I like. The canyons is pretty much the same, in the most egregious case of just copy and paste, so nothing much different is there. The mines is actually using the old design of mines, which might get a nostalgic reaction out of me if the monster didn't spawn camp. Mountains and city easily feel the most creepy because since they're the maps that I hanged out in the most in 4422139, they're the ones that I'm most familiar with, so now seeing them empty and dark easily fills me with a feeling of creepiness. And despite the garbageness of the game, there's a lot of little details in cozy areas which do show there's a lot of passion behind it. However, none of this matters, as the reason I'm talking about Scary Monkey Horror in this video is because of one area in particular, a hidden area, which is where I spent 95% of my playtime in the game. As hidden down a back alley through a portal, we are led to the back rooms. The Backrooms is an urban legend, and in short and in basic terms, the Backrooms is a place outside of reality where you get hunted down by monsters, with there being many interpretations of what the Backrooms is like. Now if you remember, the reason that Gorilla Tag Horror got popular in the first place was because of a strange feeling players got when they were in a server alone, and the Backrooms invokes that same feeling. So in many Gorilla Tag Horror games like Scary Monkey Horror, it has become a trope to include a backrooms area as a little tribute. Now the backrooms isn't very scary anymore, as so many people have used it in their animations and video games that it's become oversaturated, and it went from being a niche little urban legend to just being a pop culture phenomenon. But for some reason, as I was running around in this crap and not scary Gorilla Tag knockoff and I fell into the backrooms, the feeling of the backrooms waved over me, with the realization that there was probably a monster heading right towards me the second I stepped foot here. Venturing deeper into the backrooms, I made my way to Level Fun, an area of the backrooms which, unlike the previous ones, is all bright and colourful. However, it's all just to lure you in, so this party goer thing can kill you. Now, the design of the map was complete ass. It was just this giant room with these structures placed around the place. So figuring out where to go or what to do was rather annoying, and just slowly getting our arms tired by running around slowly got more and more painful. Me and the friends I was playing the game with knew there was an exit to this place, we just had to find it, so we just kept running aimlessly over and over and over, and when we checked the time, 3 hours had passed. That's right, this game was so ass we ended up spending 3 hours in it by accident. However, in a twisted way, this was a good thing, as it immersed ourselves into the backrooms way more than any other crappy backrooms game. Because the game is really bad, probably because it's made by someone who's never made a game before, it lacks a bunch of mechanics that are fundamental to games, which makes the experience really uncomfortable and annoying to play, just like the backrooms should feel like. It's not fun, I don't recommend you play it, but I hadn't been immersed in a game as much as I had with this in a long time. This ties into that party goer monster as well, as a good villain is one that makes an already bad situation worse by existing. And after being filled with paranoia after running around Level Fun for so much, encountering the party goer just makes the already bad situation worse, as now we have to start running away from it, and if we get caught by it, our game crashes, so all that progress is reset. So now the party goer was a proper legitimate threat. After leaving for the day, I came back to have another crack at trying to escape Level Fun, and in almost a couple minutes I found the exit immediately. It was just right there, and I had coincidentally walked past it for the past 3 hours on the last attempt, which just adds to the insanity of this place. Scary Monkey Horror isn't the only VR backrooms game to do this, as the VR chat backrooms and the backrooms all seeing both do the exact same thing, using the limitations of the game engine they're on to create a more uncomfortable horror experience. The difference with them and Scary Monkey Horror being is that those are actually good games made by more experienced people, whilst this is probably made by a 13-year-old. And that same aura and atmosphere that was coming from 4422139, the feeling of legacy I got when I stood in the server, even though it was long abandoned, I get here as well. However, Scary Monkey Horror is fairly new and it doesn't really have much of a community, or at least one that I know of. So why do I get the same feeling of community legacy from it? And that continues off the point from before. This game has no community, however it continues the legacy of previous communities from its predecessors. So even if your game has no community or legacy behind it, you can still mimic the feeling that you did have one by trying to continue the community and legacy of a previous one. But in a way, every video game does this. Every game has an inspiration behind it that it continues the legacy of, with the hopes being that the game will eventually inspire other games of its own, which, as we saw with Echo VR and Gorilla Tag, can cause a chain of games all inspired by the previous one. And there are so many other video game family trees where each game in the tree is inspired by the one that came before it, with some of these video game family trees dating back decades. So something as random as this random map in this random VR shooter can have a huge legacy behind it through what it's inspired by. And you know what, let's talk about this random map and its legacy. The rise of Gorilla Tag fan games really does prove how easy it is to make a game nowadays. As I said, even I made a Gorilla Tag fan game one time with less than a week of experience. However, it wasn't always like this, as a while ago making 3D games, especially on PC, was a very exclusive business and a difficult task. So many aspiring coders, instead of making their own games, had to resort to modding them, with games made by ID Software tending to be the most popular to mod. These included Wolfenstein, Doom, and the most infamous, Quake. Quake, as well as the engine it was made on, would primarily be developed by John Carmack, who was known for how he leaned into the modders and helped them out. He would also be the indirect cause for Echo VR's shutdown, as after he left VR, his replacement would be the one to make the order. Anyways, through modding Quake, many developers and development studios would get their start, with one of these development studios being Valve, which would go on to create the critically acclaimed Half-Life series, with Half-Life 2 becoming really popular to mod as well, bringing everything full circle. One of the mods made for Half-Life 2 was Insurgency Modern Infantry Combat, which would be so well received that the people who made the mod would end up just making it its own game, Insurgency. One of the maps you could play on in Insurgency was a map called PANJ, which was pretty controversial due to its over-reliance on stealth. Fast forward a while and we're back in virtual reality, where three main VR shooters are competing to be the Call of Duty of VR, one being Onwards, which focused on realism, the other being Pavlov, which was easily the most popular since it was free, and the third being Contractors, which is my personal favourite due to the game's extreme modding scene, with the community modding many non-VR games into VR using Contractors, like Team Fortress 2, Battlefront the old one, and Insurgency. More specifically, the map PANJ. So just like Scary Monkey Horror, this random Contractors modded map has a huge history and legacy behind it. And with that legacy, of course, comes the same atmosphere and aura that 4422139 has. And this atmosphere and aura I keep referring to all these games having all comes down to immersion, as every time this atmosphere hits me, I'm immediately immersed in whatever game I'm in. The second I join 4422139, I'm immediately immersed in Gorilla Tag. The second I slide into Level Fun, I'm immediately immersed in Scary Monkey Horror, and it's the same thing here. The second I load up into PANJ, I'm immediately immersed in Contractors. It may be a simple modded map, but its legacy makes it feel like it's an entire another world. I mentioned earlier how PANJ was a pretty controversial map in Insurgency, however in Contractors it's beloved because the style of the map perfectly fits the gameplay loop that Contractors has. Looking at the left and right side of the map, they're both walled off since they're the spawn areas for each of the two teams. However, one team can spawn at the other team's spawn point if no one is there. Each team's spawn point both have a base area, which is where the flags are in the Capture the Flag game mode, with the left side having a house with a second floor which you can shoot from, and the right having a more militaristic base at. Each side has its own pros and cons, with the house side having more cover and the base side having more vantage points for the rest of the map, since unlike the house side, it has more higher up areas you can shoot people from and less trees obstructing its vision. There's also wheat fields, which was to give you the benefit of hiding yourself, allowing you to get good snipes on people whilst avoiding snipers yourself. It leaves you hopeless if someone were to sneak up on you in the grass, as you'd be completely blind. There's also some broken down houses, which are only really used in Contractors as an emergency escape. Or if you're good with strategy, you can use them as a trap of sorts to lure players in and then shotgun or melee them. There's also a long trench system which stretches through the map, which I never used myself, but in online matches, a lot of competitive players use it to sneak around. And in the centre of the map is the Grape House, which combines everything about the map into one, with it having a trench stretching through it, a bottom layer and a top layer, each with its pros and cons, just like the different sides of the map, and holes in the wall which expert players can snipe through and out of. Every player has their own strategy in the map, and every gun variant fits in perfectly with its own purpose. I think a huge part of places in video games like PANJ having so much legacy behind them is how many different interpretations of them there are. 4422-139 went from being interpreted as a creepypasta code to just being a hangout code to now being a roleplay code. PANJ went from being the bad map in Insurgency to being the good map in Contractors. And if we put all these different ideas together, from immersiveness to community to legacy to atmosphere to aura to the concept of communities never dying, putting all these different ideas I've brought up in the video together, what is the best game that's an example of all of this? Well, it's pretty obvious. Fortnite and Minecraft. Now, all the communities that will never die I've talked about so far will never die because of their legacy living on or something like that, but Fortnite and Minecraft's community will never die simply because the games are too big to ever reach the player count of 0, at least until the world explodes. You've all probably heard the story before. Fortnite began as just a simple zombie co-op shooter before eventually adding a battle royale game mode, which at the time adding a battle royale game mode to your game was a bit of a trend. Anyways, Fortnite's battle royale game mode would blow up and become way more popular than the zombie game mode and basically hit the mainstream. In order to stay fresh, each season of Fortnite would have a wildly different theme, each with its own mechanics and story, which in turn started giving the map of the game a bit of a legacy as it evolved over the years. The community got so big it started splitting up into multiple different smaller communities who all played the game for a different reason. And since Epic Games, the developers of Fortnite, couldn't appeal to all these different communities at once, many of them started quitting the game, which would begin a little bit of a downfall in Fortnite's player base. They would also take another L as they started trying to transform Fortnite into a metaverse, basically trying to make Fortnite a modding engine for other people to make games off of, just like Quake and Half-Life. But people didn't really play the game for that reason and didn't really care about this whole modding or metaverse thing. It's also undeniable that the same immersive atmosphere and nostalgic aura is in Fortnite too, because when they brought back the old map, the player count skyrocketed just to see it. Minecraft shares a lot of similarities to Fortnite, but also so many differences. It had humble beginnings as it started as a simple sandbox game before evolving into a huge survival game with a huge community that splintered off into multiple little ones. Their big difference being whilst Fortnite has one map that's evolved over the years, in Minecraft everyone creates their own set of maps which they share with their friends. Unlike Fortnite's main battle royale map, which has one main legacy that's been carried over the years, Minecraft has millions for all the different worlds that have been created, and even though every player has a different legacy associated with the game, there's still a collective agreement that it exists. As most people who have played Minecraft online have all had that collective experience of making a base for the first time, having a fallout with a friend, making alliances, all that stuff. That all goes together to create a history of your Minecraft server that will be nostalgic for years to come. Also, unlike Fortnite, which tried to force itself into becoming a modding metaverse, Minecraft felt like it was made for modding from the beginning, so naturally it has a huge modding community, which is responsible for 75% of the aura, legacy and nostalgia of the game, whereas with Fortnite, I don't think as many people will be nostalgic for their creative maps. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I know this is a bit of an abrupt ending to the video, but I end all my videos abruptly. It's been a long night. So please subscribe, check out my other videos, and good luck with whatever you're doing.